Ink remembers everything. It holds the prayers of monks who died 1,000 years ago. It carries the weight of words carefully copied in silent rooms. It keeps the patience that comes from knowing that this work, this slow and steady work, might be the only thing that survives when kingdoms fall and languages fade. Brother Benedict knew this truth the way he knew the rhythm of his own breath. He sat in the scriptorium of Clonmacnoise Monastery on a September morning in the year 742. Sunlight entered through the narrow window to his right, falling across the vellum sheet before him in a wedge of golden light. The monastery stood on the banks of the River Shannon, in the heart of Ireland. It had been founded nearly 200 years earlier, and in those 2 centuries it had grown from a simple collection of wooden huts into one of Europe's great centers of learning and craft. Students came from across Christendom to study here. Nobles sent their sons to be educated. Pilgrims arrived seeking spiritual guidance. And through it all, the scriptorium continued its quiet work of preservation and creation. Brother Benedict had spent 48 years of his life in this room. He had entered the monastery as a boy of 12, arriving from his family's small farm with nothing but a quick mind and steady hands. The abbot had recognized something in him, some quality of patience and attention that marked him as suited for the scribe's vocation. For the first 5 years, he had prepared materials, stretching vellum until it was smooth and even, mixing inks from oak galls and iron salts and gum arabic, sharpening quills to the perfect angle, ruling lines on blank pages with lead point and straight edge. Only after mastering these fundamental tasks had he been permitted to copy text. Even then, he began with simple works, practice pages that would never be bound into finished books. The rule of Saint Benedict, psalms, short prayers. His hand had been unsteady at first, the letters irregular, the spacing inconsistent. But Brother Coleman, who supervised the scriptorium, had been patient. He had shown Benedict how to hold the quill, how to control the flow of ink, how to maintain rhythm so that each letter flowed naturally into the next. Gradually, over months and then years, Benedict's hand had become sure. His letters took on the distinctive character of the Irish scribal tradition, tall and elegant, with serifs that curved gracefully at their endpoints. He had copied his first complete gospel when he was 23 years old. The Gospel of Mark, the shortest of the 4. It had taken him 4 months of steady work, writing every day except Sundays and feast days. When he finished, Brother Coleman had examined every page carefully, checking for errors, for inconsistencies, for any flaw that might corrupt the sacred text. He had found 3 small mistakes, 3 letters transposed over hundreds of pages of careful copying. Benedict had been devastated. 3 mistakes felt like 3,000. How could he call himself a scribe if he could not maintain perfect accuracy? But Brother Coleman had smiled, his old face creasing with something that was not quite amusement, but was close to it. 3 mistakes in your first complete gospel, he had said. When I copied my first, I made 17. You have the gift, Benedict. Trust it. Nurture it. Let it serve God's purpose. That had been 37 years ago. Since then, Benedict had copied 42 complete books. Gospels, psalters, commentaries on scripture, the writings of the Church Fathers, historical texts, a bestiary, 2 herbals, an astronomical treatise translated from Greek. His work had travelled far beyond Clonmacnoise. Books he had copied now resided in monasteries across Ireland and England and on the continent. Scholars he would never meet studied from pages his hand had written. Priests he would never know preached from texts he had preserved. This was the scribe's calling, to be invisible, to let the word speak without the interference of personality or pride, to serve as a conduit through which ancient wisdom flowed into the present and onward toward the future. Benedict's current project was a psalter, a collection of the 150 psalms arranged for daily recitation. He had begun the work 4 months ago. He estimated another 2 months would be required to complete it. The vellum before him showed Psalm 73, halfway through the 2nd verse. His quill moved steadily across the page, forming letters in the beautiful Irish minuscule script that was Clonmacnoise's particular specialty. The light from the window was perfect at this hour, bright enough to see clearly, but not so bright that it caused glare on the vellum's surface. In winter, he worked in the afternoon when the sun swung toward the south. In summer, morning light served him better, before the heat built and made the scriptorium uncomfortable. Around him, 6 other monks worked at their own desks, each engaged in different stages of manuscript production. Brother Aidan prepared vellum, scraping the last remnants of flesh from sheepskin that had been soaking in lime for weeks. Brother Finan ruled lines on blank pages, his lead point moving with practiced precision. Brother Cormac mixed ink, crushing oak galls in a stone mortar, adding iron salts and water in careful proportion. 3 others copied text as Benedict did, their quills making soft scratching sounds against vellum. It was a sound Benedict had heard for nearly 5 decades, so familiar that he noticed its absence more than its presence. The work required absolute concentration. A moment's inattention could result in a transposed letter, a skipped line, a corrupted word. and errors in scripture were not merely mistakes. They were potential sources of theological confusion, doctrinal disputes, misunderstandings that could echo through centuries. So Benedict worked slowly, each letter formed with care, each word checked against the exemplar, the master text from which he was copying, each line reviewed before moving to the next. The rhythm was meditative. Dip the quill in ink, form the letter, check the exemplar, dip the quill again, another letter, another check. The repetition created its own kind of prayer, a wordless conversation between the scribe and the text, between the present moment and the ancient words being transmitted into the future. Benedict had long ago learned that the body held wisdom the mind sometimes missed. When his hand began to tire, he stopped, even if his mind felt fresh. A tired hand made mistakes. A strained shoulder affected the angle of the quill. Lower back pain from sitting too long changed posture in ways that corrupted letter formation. He set down his quill and stood, stretching carefully. His joints protested slightly. He was 60 years old now, an advanced age for a monk. Many of his generation had already died, claimed by illness or injury, or simply the accumulated weight of years lived in the harsh climate of an Irish monastery. But Benedict had been fortunate. He had good health. His eyes, though requiring more light than they once had, remained capable of the detailed work that copying demanded. His hands, though bearing the inevitable signs of age, maintained their steadiness and precision. He walked to the window and looked out over the monastery grounds. The stone church stood in the center, its round tower rising 70 feet into the clear September sky. Around it clustered the various buildings that supported monastic life: dormitory, refectory, guest house, infirmary, library, workshop. Beyond the monastery walls, fields stretched toward the river. Barley and oats grew there, tended by monks whose vocation was agricultural rather than intellectual. The monastery was largely self-sufficient, growing its own food, raising sheep and cattle, maintaining fish ponds, operating a mill on a tributary of the Shannon. Everything was connected. The farmers grew grain, the millers ground flour, the bakers made bread. The bread sustained the monks who copied texts. The texts preserved knowledge that helped the farmers grow grain more effectively. It was a cycle, a system, a small working model of civilization itself. Benedict could see Brother Malachi in the garden, tending the herbs used for medicine and cooking. Brother Ember worked with the sheep, shearing wool that would eventually become the habits the monks wore. Brother Diarmuid repaired the mill wheel, his tools glinting in the sunlight. Each man had his role. Each role was essential. None was more important than another, despite what some outside the monastery might think. The abbot reminded them of this frequently. Whether copying scripture or tending sheep, all work done to the glory of God held equal value. Benedict believed this intellectually, but in his heart he could not help feeling that the work of preservation, the work of maintaining human knowledge against the forces of decay and forgetfulness, held a particular urgency. Books were fragile, vellum deteriorated, ink faded, bindings cracked. Without constant copying, without the patient work of scribes reproducing texts, entire civilizations could disappear. Languages could be lost. Wisdom accumulated over centuries could evaporate in a single generation. This had already happened. The Roman Empire had fallen 2.5 centuries ago. Many classical texts had vanished in the chaos that followed. Libraries had burned, scholars had fled. The infrastructure that supported literary culture had crumbled. What remained survived largely because monks in places like Clonmacnoise had recognized the value of the written word. They had copied everything they could find, not just Christian texts, but pagan works too. Virgil, Cicero, Boethius, Greek philosophers in Latin translation. They had not necessarily agreed with everything they copied, but they understood that preservation came first. Judgment could wait for future generations. The immediate task was to ensure there would be future generations with access to the full range of human thought and expression. Benedict returned to his desk. The morning light had shifted slightly, and he adjusted his position to maintain the best angle. He picked up his quill, dipped it in ink, and resumed work on Psalm 73. The letters flowed. Black ink on pale vellum, permanent marks forming meaningful patterns, language made visible, thought preserved in physical form. Time passed unmeasured except by the progress of the work. When he reached the end of a page, Benedict carefully lifted it and set it aside to dry. He placed a fresh sheet of vellum on his writing board and continued. A bell rang in the distance, the call to midday prayer. Benedict set down his quill, cleaned it carefully with a damp cloth, and covered his ink pot. The other scribes did the same. They rose and filed out of the scriptorium in silence, making their way toward the church. The monastery observed 7 prayer services throughout each day, from vigils in the deep hours of night through compline just before bed. These prayers structured monastic time, marking the passage of hours, creating rhythm and purpose. Benedict found comfort in this structure. Life outside the monastery could feel chaotic, subject to unpredictable forces. But within these walls, each day followed a predictable pattern: prayer, work, meals, study, sleep. The cycle repeated endlessly, creating stability, providing purpose. The church interior was cool and dim after the bright sunshine outside. Benedict took his usual place in the choir stall, standing with the other monks as they chanted the psalms appointed for midday. His voice joined with theirs, creating the layered harmony of Gregorian chant. The music was ancient, passed down through generations of monks, each generation teaching the next, preserving melodies that had been sung for centuries. Like the work of copying texts, this was a form of preservation, maintaining traditions that connected present believers with the long line of faithful who had come before. The service lasted perhaps 20 minutes. When it ended, the monks processed to the refectory for the main meal of the day. They ate in silence while one of the younger brothers read aloud from the lives of the saints. The food was simple but adequate: bread, cheese, a thick vegetable stew flavored with herbs from the garden, small beer to drink, no meat, as was customary for most of the year except on feast days. Benedict ate slowly, mindful of the body's needs but not indulgent. Gluttony was a sin, but so was insufficient care for the vessel God had provided. The body required fuel to do its work. The mind required rest and nourishment to maintain clarity. After the meal, there was a period of recreation, the one time of day when conversation was permitted without special need. Benedict walked in the cloister garden with Brother Finan, discussing the technical aspects of vellum preparation. Finan was 40 years younger than Benedict, still learning his craft. He had questions about the proper thickness for different types of documents, about how to identify the best skins for important works, about storage methods that prevented deterioration. Benedict shared what he knew, not as a teacher claiming authority, but as one craftsman conversing with another. He had learned from those who came before him. Finan would learn from him and would someday pass that knowledge to the next generation. This was how the craft survived, not through written manuals, though some existed, but through direct transmission, master to apprentice, hand to hand, generation following generation in an unbroken chain stretching back centuries. The recreation period ended. The monks dispersed to their afternoon duties. Benedict returned to the scriptorium. The afternoon light would be good for another 3 hours, perhaps 4. He intended to make full use of it. He settled at his desk, uncovered his ink, and examined the page he had been working on before prayers. The letters remained crisp, the lines straight, the spacing consistent. Good. He could continue. The afternoon passed in the same rhythm as the morning. Quill dipping in ink, letters forming, lines advancing down the page, words accumulating into sentences, sentences into verses, verses into psalms. Psalm 74, Psalm 75. The work progressed steadily, like a traveler covering ground, not through speed, but through consistent pace, maintained hour after hour. Benedict's mind entered a particular state during these long periods of copying. Not quite empty, but also not full of scattered thoughts. Focused, but in a relaxed way. Present to the work, but also open to whatever arose in consciousness. Sometimes prayers would surface unbidden, sometimes memories, sometimes simple awareness of the body's sensations, the slight ache in the shoulders, the pressure of the seat against his legs, the feel of the quill in his hand. He did not push these away, nor did he pursue them. He let them arise and pass like clouds moving across the sky, returning attention always to the task at hand. This letter, this word, this line. The afternoon bell rang for vespers. Benedict completed the line he was working on and stopped. In the scriptorium, work always yielded to prayer. The schedule was sacred, not to be altered for the convenience of any individual task. Evening prayers were longer than those at midday, with more elaborate chanting, more time for contemplation. Afterward came supper, a lighter meal than midday, then a brief period of personal reading before compline, the final prayers that prepared the community for sleep. Benedict read from a small gospel book that he had copied 20 years earlier. The words were familiar, but familiarity did not diminish their power. If anything, knowing the text deeply allowed him to notice nuances, to find meanings that revealed themselves only through patient attention. Compline was the quietest of the daily offices. The church was lit by only a few candles. The chanting was soft, almost whispered. After the final prayers, the monks observed the great silence, speaking no word until after morning prayers the next day. Benedict made his way through the darkened monastery to the dormitory. His cell was simple, just large enough for a bed, a small table, a stool. A crucifix hung on the wall. A lamp sat on the table, but he did not light it. He lay on his bed in the darkness, letting his body rest, feeling the day's work settle into his muscles and bones. Tomorrow would bring more of the same, more psalms to copy, more words to preserve, more small contributions to the great work of maintaining human knowledge against the tide of forgetting. His last thoughts before sleep were of the manuscript taking shape page by page. In his mind's eye, he saw the completed book, the Psalms all transcribed, the decorated initials illuminated in colors drawn from the earth itself, the binding sturdy and beautiful, the whole work a worthy vessel for carrying sacred words into the future. 2 more months, perhaps. Maybe 3 if he took proper care not to rush, not to tire himself, not to make mistakes that would require scraping and recopying. He was old enough to know that 3 months was not guaranteed. Death came when it came, without warning, without waiting for convenient stopping points in human projects. But he was not worried. If death came before the Psalter was finished, another scribe would complete it. The work would continue. It always did. That was the nature of monastic life, the great strength of an institution that transcended individual lives. Benedict closed his eyes, his breathing slowed and deepened. The day released its hold on him. Sleep arrived, quiet and complete, carrying him into darkness. The dormitory was silent except for the soft breathing of 70 monks, each lost in his own dreams, each sustained by the same purpose, each part of a community dedicated to prayer and work and the preservation of all that was best in human culture. Tomorrow the sun would rise, the bells would ring, the work would continue. For tonight there was only rest. The monastery slept, the river Shannon flowed past in darkness. The round tower stood like a sentinel against the star-filled sky. And in the scriptorium, 43 incomplete manuscripts waited for the hands that would finish them. The vellum absorbing moisture from the night air, the ink in its pots patient and ready, the quills arranged in their holders, each one cut and shaped for the particular preferences of the scribe who used it, all waiting for morning, for light, for the resumption of the work that never truly ended, because the work was larger than any individual, larger than any single generation, larger even than the monastery itself. The work was the preservation of civilization itself, the maintaining of the fragile thread that connected the past to the present and the present to whatever future might come. Benedict slept peacefully, his hands resting on his chest, his breathing slow and even. Somewhere in his dreams, letters formed themselves into words, words into meaning, meaning into something transcendent and eternal. The work continued even in sleep, even in darkness, even in the unknown hours between one day and the next. This was September in the year 742. Brother Benedict would wake tomorrow. He would pray. He would copy more verses. He would eat and rest and pray again. He would return to his small cell and sleep. And the day after that would be the same. And the day after that. And so on until the Psalter was complete, or until his hands could no longer hold the quill, or until death came to claim him, releasing him from the work, but not ending the work itself. For the work was eternal. The work was sacred. The work was the thread connecting all who had ever set pen to parchment with the intention of preserving truth for future generations. And in that work there was profound peace. Rest now.